Hello everyone, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about the theory behind the natal chart. And buckle up because this is going to be a long one. Now the very first thing is please do not leave in the comment section here with your date and time of birth. It's way too risky. You open yourself up for identity theft, so don't do it. Also, I do not do Qi as part of my business. It's not going to get you much results. I have a recommendation. If you really want to get this done by someone, I have someone to recommend for you. I am not a Qi or Batsa expert or even close, although I have taken a class in Qi and I'm going back over that and kind of relearning what I've learned. I've never really done much with Batsa. So just want you to know where I stand on this. Now, if you want to have an analysis done, I would recommend John Chong. You can find him on John Metaphysics, by searching on Facebook. And I'd like you to, if you use him, I'd like you to mention that I recommended him to you. Now, my purpose of these videos is to teach you how to look at a Qi chart and mostly a natal Qi chart, and to understand your innate strengths and weaknesses. Now, sometimes they can be a surprise to you. It depends on what your childhood was like. You may not understand you have certain strengths, maybe because your parents didn't pay any attention to this kind of thing because they didn't value a certain aspect. But there's no reason not to use it if you have it. I'm going to start first with the guardian spirit sector because this is supposed to tell you about your basic personality. But you have to really look at the whole chart to get a full picture of your strengths and weaknesses because it depends on what your focus is, which can change over your life, how you interpret the chart. But it's just a slight tweaking when you look at a different focus point. It's all still basically there. So here's a basic example. This is kind of what you might, the general picture of how you would get from a Joey Yap, the free Joey Yap site. Now he'll have a lot of English words underneath all this. There's just not room to have this whole thing. The bigger characters will be in Chinese, but there will be English beneath them. And there will be on the Joey Yap site, there will be a thing labeled Destiny. I believe it'll be on the right-hand side vertically. In the Chinese Metasoft site, I think it'll be below here. And it's not the only thing that's highlighted like this, but it's the one that is, you just have to look for the highlighted one and read what it says. There will be another point in here that will also be highlighted with the word envoy, which is something separate and you don't have to worry about it for now. Now, both of the places that I recommend arrange each one of these sectors in this way. The spirit is always in the upper right. The star is in the middle on the top. The door is in the middle on the bottom. And the heaven and the earth stems are one over the other with the heaven stem on top. And wherever you have the word destiny, this is your guardian spirit sector. Now I'm going to talk about this chart in the practical part of this two-part thing. This is the theory. I'll have the practical in another video. Now, this happens to have a Fu Yin in the doors, stars, and stems. This is as Fu Yin of a chart as you can get because this is all the same. The rest door is here, the scenery door is here, the open door is here. That is a Fu Yin chart, and the heart is here, and so when you look at this, you will recognize this. Of course, the English words will help too, but there's just not room on here to do that. Now, this is color-coded like you're going to see on the Joey Yap site. However, when you're doing a natal chart reading, you ignore the color coding. A red is supposed to indicate positive and a black negative. That is used in forecast readings, not in a natal chart analysis. So, as I said, the color coding for positive and negative is more for forecasting, and you will see just two colors on the Joey F site. The Chinese Metasoft site is actually better, in my opinion. Might be one reason they're not free, but they color code each element based, or each of the entities, the stars, stems, doors, and spirits, based on their element. Brown is earth. It's either black or a dark gray, I can't tell which, is metal. Blue is water, green is wood, and red is fire. So it's a lot easier to know what's going on. But this is still used more in forecasting, because if you have a fire entity in the water sector, that means that it's going to be tamed quite a bit. And that is important for forecasting. It's not apparently terribly important in your natal chart reading. Again, for both of these, ignore the color for the natal chart readings. It's really only important in forecasting. Now, your guardian spirit sector will be the sector in your chart where the heaven stem and the day stem are the same. Now, your day master stem may be in the center of the chart, and if it is, it's also going to be in one of the 8 outer sectors, but it'll be a very small little character right next to the heaven stem, and it can be very hard to read. So this is one good reason why it's good to print it out so that you in a PDF format and zoom in, because it's really hard to read, and there'll be more than one thing that one of these small characters floating around next to the heaven and the earth stems. So you really have to be able to zoom in. And unless you have a very big screen, you probably cannot see it on what comes out on the screen. It's just too small. Now all the entities have an effect in each sector, but some sectors are more important than others. So you will get to see this as I go through the rest of it, why I say this. There are some that you can totally ignore, and let's hope these are the ones that aren't important to you. Now I'm going to cover the sectors other than this one with the guardian spirit sector. I'm going to cover the ones that are corresponding to career, wealth, and relationships. I've already talked a lot about health, and that is a much more complicated thing than just looking at a single sector. So I'm not going to cover that here because I've talked about it before. And I'm also going to, for each one of these, I am going to do a practical version of how you actually apply it, because you're going to have individual properties for each one of the things, but you'll have to combine it all in the end. That's also where a little bit of art comes in play. Now, the videos that have the practical side, or actually showing you how you apply it in full, will have the word practice or practical in the title. Now, don't be surprised if a single sector doesn't represent you. And that's true even of the guardian spirit sector, which is supposed to tell you all about your basic personality. Other sectors can have more influence depending on your goals, and in your childhood can also have some effect that you may not realize something, and it may never come out. Now, some practitioners, when they get your Chi chart, they use the time on your birth certificate. Others really insist on using the solar time. And there are a few that even want to know the time and date in China at the time when you were born, if you were born outside of China. So they convert it back to Chinese time. But that is one of the more rare ones. For me, the solar time seems to correspond best to my personality. So I do like the idea of using solar time. Now the timeanddate.com site under the Sun and Moon tab can help you determine this, and I've got a video that described this in more detail. But basically, the rule is if you find the solar noon is after 12, wherever you were born, then you subtract those extra minutes beyond the 12 from your actual birth time. And if it's before 12, you would add the extra minutes to your birth time. So it's relatively simple. These 5 entities, spirit, door, star, and the heaven and earth stems, will always be in every sector of the natal chart except the center. The center will only have the heaven and earth stems. So they correspond to different things, and I think I've talked about this before, but the spirit gives you special skills. This is really only true if you're reading it for your natal chart. And there's a connection to the universe, which is why this is used for manifestations. And how you manifest and what you wish for can have a difference in who you might choose to connect to in the spirit world. Of course, most people start out with their own guardian spirit because they're supposed to have a better connection with that one. The door is related to the actions you take. And it basically, in a natal chart, means how you generally or normally respond to events. And of course, it's used for activations because it's about actions. The star, this is connected to things beyond an individual's control. It's more like society. And it also governs your general worldview. Now, it is used more for divination or forecasting interpretations. It has an effect in your natal chart by your worldview, but it doesn't have a lot more than that. Now, the heaven and earth stems basically talk about your personality attributes. And again, it'll be strengths and weaknesses of this. And every single one of these has a good side and a bad side, or a dark side and a light side, if you are a fan of Star Wars. Now, depending on which software you use, you may get some additional information. The Chinese Metasoft site gives you the hexagram, which the Joey App site does not. But the Joey App site gives you the 7-star level and the constellations. Now, the constellations, there's a book about this. This is not quite so mysterious, but even in the large, very expensive compendium, the 7-star level is mentioned, but nothing is said on how it is created, where everything else, all of this stuff is described in great detail how you would create a chart, but nothing is said about the 7-star level, which I find, if it's not in the compendium, why do you use it? Because nobody can figure this out. I am quite frankly a little annoyed at Joey App for not telling us how that's done. But I don't know that it's super important either, because I really don't know truly what it means, because I can't understand where it comes from. But Joey App and the people who work for his Joey App group are about the only people that ever mention this, which also makes me think it's really not that important. Now, you can go to the free Joey App site or the Chinese Metasoft site, which is not free, but you can get your Chiman chart from either one. The Chinese Metasoft site has a little bit more information about what each sector corresponds to than the free Joey App site. But when you do this, make sure you click on Destiny for the chart type, because you can get the year, month, the day, and the hour charts from here. So this is actually very, very useful. And if you want to use your 3 Victories Palace, this is one of the cheaper places to get the information that you'll need. Now, after you've entered the date and time of your birth, there's another drop-down tab just to the right of that. That's where you enter the word destiny, because there's, I don't know, maybe 6 different possible charts. In general, I think it's good to set your time to Beijing time, and you only need to do this once. And then you would either use your local, that is clock time, or the solar one, whichever one you want to use. That's how you would get your chart from the Chinese Metasoft site. Now, the Joey Yap site uses, you could put in either your solar or local time, but they automatically basically pretend it's like in Beijing. So it's a little easier to deal with. And you want to use whatever time you used here, you'll use here. And if you get a different chart, something's wrong with what you set up with this time. So it can be a little complicated, and if it's too complicated, just use Joey Yap's, because he does get that. He does assume the local time. And so it can either be solar or clock time. It's up to you. And the nicest thing about the Joey Yap site is that when you do forecasting, it gives you a shortcut. It tells you what's positive, what's negative by the color. But you don't pay any attention to that in a natal chart. And the 7-star level is supposed to tell you is your level of attunement to your guardian spirit. And this has a bit to do with how easy it is for you to basically do manifestation. Now, I like to use both sites combined together because it gives you more information than a single site. So, but the Joey Yap, free Joey Yap one is good enough for this purpose. Now, there's 2 possible modes to exist in life, and one is healthy and the other is unhealthy. And this has a lot to do with your attitude. If you are in the healthy state, that basically means the positive aspects of all your elements in your chart, they emerge. Now, healthy means that you're generally at least not sad. I mean, happy is better, but you see hope. There's hope in the future. You have the ability to have the energy to work hard to improve your life, and you think it's worth it. You see a road forward to have your life get better. When you're in the unhealthy state, unfortunately, all the negative aspects of your chart's elements come out, and that tends to lead you to get even more negative. And here, this would be basically when you've given up, when you don't think it's worth learning something new because you don't think that's going to help you find any better job, or it's not going to improve your life at all. You just don't see a way forward. You've given up. Now, most people are closer to one side than the other, but they often have a mix with different aspects of their life, especially when they're young. When you're young, you may be really gung-ho about your career, but your relationships, your personal relationships, close relationships are kind of screwed up. That's actually not unusual. And as time goes on, they usually get better on both sides. But there is a continuum. This is not like cut and dried. And you can shift from one to another throughout your life. When you have very negative things happen in your life, it is hard to stay out of the unhealthy state. But that is usually temporary. But there are people who have really given up, and basically the only way they get out of the unhealthy state without help is to get to rock bottom and work their way back up. There are some methods that you can use that can help you turn from an unhealthy to a healthy state. And manifestation is one. Now, if you remember, manifestation is just talking to your subconscious. So you change some basic beliefs about yourself so that you're first reaction isn't negative, it's more positive. That works better for some people than others. I don't seem to have much luck with manifestation. Now, learning something new that can help you overcome your problem, that can also help turn you from a negative to a positive, especially if you apply it and it starts to work. But there are times when things are just very tough, so therapy and medication should not be rejected. This can really make a difference in certain people's lives. And basically, it depends on how bad your life is, whether or not you want to do this. And there are places, at least in certain countries, where you can get this for either no or very little cost. And this is something to consider, especially if you just don't see a way forward. Now, the following tables that I'm going to give you are really only apply in the guardian spirit sector. They do apply to some extent for all sectors, but this is a little bit more focused to just your guardian spirit sector. Again, I'm going to cover these other sectors in other videos, and you may see some tweaks and changes in there, but it's still generally all about this. Now, anyone can exhibit either a positive or negative side of the properties that I'm going to list here on the table. It depends largely on your attitude, which side you're going to fall into. So, in a natal chart, the spirits, doors, stars, and stems, they have positive and negative qualities to them. Resilient people tend to exhibit the positive side, and depressed people tend to exhibit the negative side. So you can see that in people too. It will make sense as you go on. Now, what I list here is only for doing your natal chart. Forecast readings are interpreted very differently. So don't use this for forecasting. It won't work. So first, let's cover the spirits. So there are 10 spirits, but there's only 8 boxes that they fill. So the first 6 are in everybody's chart. And then you're either going to have the hook and the phoenix, or you're going to have the tiger and the tortoise. And the hook and the phoenix, if you were born between winter solstice and the summer solstice of the following year, that is, you will have the hook and the phoenix. But if you were born after the summer solstice and before the winter solstice of any given year, you'll have the tiger and the tortoise. So you're not going to have all of these. So the chief basically is one of the best guardian spirits to have. They tend to be leaders. They have an ability to manifest quite easily. They have high morals. They tend to be quite good people. But when things go bad, they can become unyielding, demanding. They can be really hard to live with. The heaven, which is also called 9 heavens, this grants you foresight and vision, and you tend to be in the right place at the right time. It's nearly as good as the chief. But you have to be careful about what you envision, because when you worry about things, they can happen. So you have to be kind of careful. And actually, that's another thing with the chief you have to be a bit careful with. The chief will not allow you to harm somebody else. So if you have negative feelings and you're angry at somebody and wish bad luck to that person, it tends to come back to you. So in general, forgive people. If you have the chief, just forgive people. It doesn't mean you have to hang around them or be their friends. Just don't wish bad on them, because it usually comes back. This is like the king of karma. Now the 9 earth, which is what is sometimes called, These people tend to be nurturing. They have a gift of acquiring good property, especially good Shimen, not Shimen, good feng shui properties. They have a kind of a natural gift for that. They also tend to have long, healthy lives. But they can also be too easygoing. They can be slow to adapt to new things. So they're not necessarily driven, which actually is okay too. Now the moon, they tend to be quite deep thinkers. They thirst for knowledge, but they can also be quite secretive with their knowledge. But they can also become quite detached and aloof and just not interested in people. So they can also be hard to live with. Now, the harmony, these people, everybody should have at least one harmony friend. They're friendly, communicative, and they connect to people really, really easily. And but they can become too dependent on others, and this can make even their friends shy away from them a bit because they just can't handle that much need. So becoming needy can be an issue when things go wrong in the life of someone with the harmony spirit. Now the snake, they tend to be fast learners, and they can sense and sometimes control the environment. But they can also be indecisive and even can become manipulative. So I do think that, and now I am a snake, and I do think that I can sense some of the environment, especially when I'm driving. I have avoided accidents. I've had accidents happen in front of me or behind me, and the ones in front of me don't block my way out of it, and I don't get involved in it. I just have been pretty lucky with this. It's not that I've never been in an accident, but the worst accident I was in was when somebody else was driving, and but I probably saved my own life because when I was 18, I was in my car at a traffic light. Nobody was behind me, which was good. And it turned green, and I just sat there staring at it, going, so it's green. And a big pickup truck came barreling through the intersection on his red, my green, and he would have T-boned me on my side of the car. Of course, back then there were no airbags. I don't think I would have survived because he was in a big truck and I was in a small car. And they were not, back then, those cars, small cars didn't survive accidents very well. So, and just recently I was on my way to an appointment, and I decided to drive away. I don't normally drive, but I know the path. But and I was avoiding construction. And so I knew there was a light that I had to be in the right-hand lane if I wanted to make a turn right in a very short distance. And I'm coming up to the light and I realize I'm in the left lane. And there's cars on my right side, so I can't change lanes. So I said, well, okay, I guess I'm going to have to just drive to the next road where the construction is, and I'll just have to deal with it. Well, right before the light changed green for us, someone made a U-turn and another person hit them. And they blocked the right lane, but not the left lane that I was in. So I was able to go. And that was because I wasn't paying enough attention. I was actually sort of in a zone. And that was the kind of same zone feeling when I didn't pull out on the green light. So I think I know when I'm actually sensing the environment. And this is, you got to get, you will be able to do this when you're in the right mindset. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. Now, the hook is a little tricky. I'm not sure that I put this in the healthy, but they generally have a take no prisoners approach. So they're very, very tough. And they're supposed to have some link to past lives, or some can call upon past lives, which I quite frankly don't understand exactly what that means. But somehow they may know something from their past life. But when they go negative, they're very easy to fall into narcissism, and they generally have big egos anyway. But jealousy is a big problem. And once they get jealous, they really head towards the negative side, the unhealthy side. And so these people with a hook have, let's say, the biggest tendency to be able to fall to the negative side because their no take no prisoners approach makes a lot of enemies. Now the tiger's quite interesting. They're courageous, they have a lot of energy, they tend to be quite healthy, and they're also intelligent. So they're very special people. But when things go bad, they can become aggressive. They can also be very impulsive, even at the best of times. And they can have a hard time connecting with people, largely because they have a very hard time sitting still. And most people are, when they chat, they're sitting there having dinner or something, and you're sitting still and relaxing. That's the time when most people like to chat. But these people would rather chat while they're running. So they do sometimes have a hard time connecting with people. Now the phoenix, they're very good communicators, and they tend to be quite persuasive. So they're very good salesmen. But if things aren't going really well in their lives, sometimes they can be offensive and not necessarily realize it. They can also start lying when things go bad because they want things to be better, and if a lie will do it, they'll do it. Their morals are a little bit looser. They also love gossip, which there's nothing wrong with loving gossip, but that can get you into trouble if you say something to the wrong person. So, gossip, I don't know if gossip really helps anybody, but, I don't gossip, so, I can't really say. Now, the tortoise, they are intuitive, they're intelligent, they're usually quite creative too, and they can be attuned to people's emotions, and they can also affect people's emotions. So they can be really good speakers, um, like people who are there to encourage other people. They're good therapists too because they're attuned to people's emotions. But when things go bad, they can become scheming. They can take shortcuts to get where they want to go, even illegal ones. And so this can get a little tricky. And if you are in a situation, let's say you're born into a poor environment where you don't have much job opportunities, these people often head towards the illegal side because they really don't have any other options. I mean, maybe they have some, but you know, if they're not lucky, this is where they end up. Now let's talk about the stars. So the ambassador. Again, we're going to be looking only at your guardian sector, so you got to find that first. So the ambassador tends to be driven, resourceful. They'll get the job done. They'll work very hard to get it done if they have to. But they can also be quite aloof, arrogant, and in general, they don't have a gray area. They can be quite rigid. And in general, they tend to be more conservative in their viewpoint. They don't like change. They want to be able to count on things so that they know what to do and can get their work done quickly. It's all about getting the job done. Now, the assistant believes knowledge equals power, and I'm not going to argue with that, but they also want to make a world a better place. So this is, assistants are generally quite good. Now, these people are good teachers, in general. And they like imparting knowledge, but they can also overanalyze things that can make them anxious. They can be quite hard to please when things aren't going well. So they can, and I think everybody's had at least one teacher that was hard to please. So maybe they were having a rough patch in their life. Now, the heart. Uh, they're quite ingenious and creative, inventive, innovative. They also can be quite objective and non-judgmental. They can step back. They make good judges because of that. But when things go bad, they can become quite detached. In general, and I don't know if this is generally it's not a great thing, but in general, they won't take orders anyway, uh, whether they're in a good place or a bad place. But they can become quite distant from people and just kind of withdraw from society when things start to go bad. Now, the hero, as you might expect, they're courageous, they're confident, they're inspirational, and these kind of people are the kind of people who fight for the poor, so they're like Robin Hood. But when they get over confident, or whenever something goes wrong, well then they can become very vain because they've had success before, and they say, I know what I'm doing, I know I'm right. As a parent, they can become overprotective. They can become control freaks. So this can make it very difficult. And I think that a person who is a hero that goes into the site may not understand why they're doing what they're doing. Now, I'm not a hero, so but I think they probably look at themselves and says, I don't know why I'm doing this. Uh, why am I acting this way? And that's kind of true of everything here. I mean, the negative side, I know this was wrong, or this was not the right way to react. Why do I keep reacting that way? That's an indication that you're in the unhealthy side. Now, the destructor, they're also courageous, they're eager for change, and they're good with pressure. But they can become impatient and temperamental, and sometimes they'll do change just for change's sake, which doesn't have a reason. So, and they can also change, they can want change to happen before the rest of society, even long before the rest of society is willing to do a change. And so they can be out of time. Let's say they're not in sync with society. But they also tend to be people that you remember later because they tend to change things, and not always for the better, but most of the time for the better. Now, the grain, they're dependable, loyal, they care about their friends, and they're also determined. So these are really good people to have as friends. But they can also become stubborn, inflexible, and they have trouble with stress tolerance. They don't have stress tolerance, basically. So then their dependable side vanishes, basically, when they head towards the unhealthy side. Now, the grass, they tend to be driven, mentally tough, and good at risk taking. And they're also pretty good at money making because they're good at risk taking, and they're driven enough to learn what they need to do to make a good investment. So these people are pretty good at being financial advisors, but they can become quite impatient. They can become so focused that they ignore everything else. And they can become irritable when, of course, everybody can, but in particular, they can become quite irritable. And, that drives people away. Now, the pillar, they are quite determined, they're hard workers, and they're very detail oriented. And but they can be too rule oriented and too detail oriented, so that they can't get the job done in a reasonable amount of time. So some have said these people, they work hard, not necessarily work smart. So they don't always adapt to change, or new ways of doing things, even when that would help them. Uh, so but these people are really good, like on assembly line work. They're very good at doing the same thing over and over again, and they're okay with that. A lot of people aren't, including myself. I could never work on an assembly line. Now, even though the bird is generally positive, and I put it here at the bottom because it's not always there. But if you are lucky enough to have one of these, you tend to be visionary and you can make things happen. You have the gumption and the attitude that you can make something happen, and you usually do. They're also good mediators, but they can be fickle and they can crack under pressure. They're not really good at handling pressure when things aren't going well for them. So I'm going to tell you how when a bird is present and when you read it. So a bird can be, or maybe will be, present when a person's day master is the same as the stems, the two stems, which will always be identical in the center sector. And this also shows up as the hidden stem where the grain star is. And this usually means that this is also the person's guardian sector too. And it is most often read in a natal chart. Some people read it in a forecasting chart, others don't. So this is basically what you're going to see. You'll have you always have the same two stems. I mean, they'll always be identical. It won't always be Bing. It won't be Yang fire. But there'll be two stems here. And you'll also see a small version of that next to the heaven stem. And it has to be the heaven stem. And that will then pop up the bird. Now you'll have a spirit, door, stem. These other ones don't make any difference. These can be anything. And even when even though these are the same, these don't have to be the same. But this is the sector with the grain. So that can happen, but there's one more step that needs to happen. This person's day master must be Yang fire. And so this would also be their guardian spirit sector because the Yang fire is here. So, and so you can miss, this is that small character, and actually I printed it larger in respect to the heaven stem than was actually in the charts. It's very much smaller in the charts. It can be very easy to miss. Now we're going to talk about the doors. So the open door, these people are also good leaders, and usually, or at least they have leader skills, and they tend to be quite ambitious, but they can become argumentative and confrontational when things go badly. And this can, of course, happen occasionally, but everybody can do this too. Now, the life door, they tend to be quite hungry for success, and not necessarily in a business. This is more career or job related. This is life related. This is more entrepreneurial than career. They also tend to be quite confident. But on the negative side, they can become addicted to power and money, and that comes at a cost to their personal relationships. So there's, you always have to be a little careful with this. The rest door, they tend to be caring, loving people, and kindness basically drives them. But when things aren't going bad, they can be gullible, and they generally cannot handle pressure. And that is somewhat true even when they're in the healthy state. There'll be a breaking point for them. Now the scenery, they're quite creative. They're good communicators. So this is a pretty good door to have in your guardian spirit sector. But they can also be too sensitive, that is to words, and they can get upset easily. And also they can avoid responsibilities. They may say they can do it, but then maybe because they're too upset about something, they never get it done. So they can avoid responsibilities when things are really going bad for them. So the delusion door, if you have that in your guardian spirit sector, this often means you're very good at research. So that, of course, means you're smart. But you can become arrogant and ignore other people's feelings when things aren't going so well. And actually, they can happen at the same time. You can be very good about your career and not very good about people. Now, I would say that Sheldon from the Big Bang is probably like a classical example of this. So you can think of a nerd, an arrogant nerd that is a little bit on the spectrum of autism, I guess. That would be kind of like the classical thing. Interestingly, the death door is actually really good to have a friend who has the death door. They're trustworthy, which is very nice. They tend to be generous, and they, in a forecast reading, this is very different. This is not negative in a natal reading. But when things go bad, and in general, they have a pretty easy time to fall into a pessimistic viewpoint. So they have to really watch that. They can also lack direction. They don't have like something that drives them. And that is really common in younger people who have the death door. They just don't know what they want to do with their lives. And this can also result, when it gets really bad, in a hoarding situation where they just collect stuff, which is kind of like the opposite of being generous, but that is the flip side. Now, the harm door, despite what it says, they basically want to make the world a better place. So it's very different again. In most of these names have more to do with the forecast reading. So this is why they can sound weird but be quite good. Now, they're good at this. I mean, they really do try to make the world a better place. But when things go bad for them, they can become impulsive, impatient. They often overpromise and underdeliver. So they but that's only when they're in an unhealthy state. Now, the fear door, they tend to be quite practical, logical. They're good at analysis. So they kind of a bit like the delusion door, but they're maybe not quite so they're not quite so aware of their intelligence. So they can be very narrow-minded. They won't take risks when maybe they should. So this can harm their ability to, when they just invest in really safe things. So they kind of miss out. But because they're good at analysis, they often have a decent job. So it kind of balances out. But the narrow-mindedness can be a problem especially when they have to work with a bunch of different people. So they can be quite narrow-minded about the way things should be, and shoulds in quote, of course. Then finally, we have the stems. Now, these are elements, but they basically represent people. So if you have, and the heaven stem in your guardian spirit chart is the more important one. And if it happens to be Yangwood, and this will show up as a tiny little character. It's also one of the hidden ones. So you've got to look closely for this. You tend to have strong morals. You're powerful and influential with others, but you can become quite prideful, vain and inflexible. Yangwood represents a tree. Trees are not terribly flexible, at least most of them are not. And of course, a tree can break in the wind, because they don't flex. The Yinwood, they're adaptable and flexible. They're good problem solvers too, because they're adaptable and flexible. But they, when things aren't good for them, they lack endurance and they can become argumentative. And when they're tired, they often become argumentative. Now, the Bing fire, Yang fire that is, they tend to be very passionate, and you will know that they're passionate about something because you can tell by how enthusiastic they are. They're self-starters, which is fantastic, but they're idealistic, which sometimes can be a negative because they could, this is one of those, do I put it in the positive or do I put it in the negative? But they can become egotistical and blind to reality, which is being too idealistic, So this is one that kind of goes in both categories. Now, the Ding fire, the yin fire, they are committed people in general. They're not unpassionate, but they're not as passionate as the yang fire. They also seek knowledge, and they're curious people. They really want to know what's going on, but they can be suspicious and emotionally volatile. Like they're happy one second and angry the next when they're in the unhealthy mode. The yang, earth, the wu, they are tough, they're persistent. Now, this represents a mountain. So you can think of the strength of a mountain. So they're very hard to move, but they're also deep thinkers. And of course, like a mountain, at least most mountains, they're reliable. But they can become perfectionistic, which, because they have to get everything right, they can become indecisive. So they can also not deliver when they're supposed to deliver because they're trying to get it 100% right, and that's impossible actually. Now the G Earth is they're supportive, they're nurturing, but they're also quick problem solvers. So if you're a mother who has G Earth, they're really good mothers. They nurture their kids very well, and when a problem happens, they know how to deal with it. I mean, this would be a very good mother. Things would run smoothly in the household. But when things go bad, they can have mood swings, basically emotional volatility. But this is kind of more short-lived. This is a bit longer. They also tend to have thin skins. That is, they're easily hurt by words. The gung metal, the yang metal, they tend to be quite objective, cool-headed, and they're tough opponents. So this is another thing that would be good for a judge. But they can be too stubborn, and they can also be too competitive. When things go bad, they know they can do better, and they compete really hard, that kind of thing. For the yin metal, the sin, they tend to be visually quite refined, elegant people, and if they don't have the natural looks, they'll do whatever it takes, makeup, even plastic surgery, to look their best. But they're intelligent, which kind of makes you think, well, why do they have to worry about this? But they are intelligent. They're great at networking. They really like to connect with people. But again, they can have perfectionist tendencies, and they in general cannot handle stress. Now, the yang metal is considered to be metal like in a sword or a knife. And so it's really tough. Whereas the sin metal is more like jewelry, which is a lot easier to break. So that is how these different things come out. Now the yang water, they are adaptable. They're pretty laid back oftentimes. They're usually optimistic, and they're good planners. So they're very good to have when they're in a good thing. But they can also become easily distracted, and if they're in a bad situation and they're in a position of power like somebody's boss, they won't delegate. And if your boss is a yang water, the Ren, in his heavenly stem, and things aren't going well, and he's not letting anybody help, my recommendation is find a new job, because unless he can come out of this, the whole department will suffer, because he's going to be distracted, and he won't let people help him, or her. So this is one that when they go negative, it becomes very difficult. Now the yin water, the gui, they are creative, they're communicative, they have high levels of empathy. They're not particularly focused on earning a lot of money. They'd rather have a creative job than one that earns a lot. but they can be moody and suspicious, and they're often too meek. They don't stand up for themselves when maybe they should. So, they're like a small, gentle stream that is easy to redirect because they're not very forceful. Whereas this could be, like the ocean or big lake that is much harder to change. So your day master actually can also help with your understanding of your achievement chart in terms of how resistant you are to going towards the negative. And your day master will be the heaven stem in your day pillar, in your batsa. Now, rooted day masters in general tend to have a better chance at being on the positive or healthy side of things, of any of the entities. We just talked about the doors and stems and all that stuff. They tend to be on the positive side. And that's because they're rooted like a tree is rooted. They have some stability in their inner core. Now, rooted means that in the hidden stems and in your batsa, you'll have the heavenly stem, the earth branch, and then the hidden stems. And in the hidden stems, it'll be the same as your day master. There'll be at least one of them. And if it's in the day pillar, that's the strongest. And if it's in the if it's in the hour or the month, that's the second strongest, and the year is the weakest, but it's still there. So it still has energy. Now, this is an example of a rooted yin wood day master, because we have yin down here and we have it here. This is an example of a chart that's not rooted. The day master is gung metal, and it does not exist anywhere here. There is metal here, but it's not gung. But it's probably has at least a little bit of influence because it at least is the same element. But in general, this is not considered really rooted. Now, unrooted day masters tend to feel more peer pressure. Their friends can influence them, their society can influence them. So their moral code is a bit more loose. Also, strong day masters have strong personalities, and they tend to also withstand outside influence. Now, if you, John Chung, who I already mentioned before, he has several videos that explain these ideas in more detail. And again, if you want an actual reading or an analysis of your natal chart, I would suggest you contact him, because he does do this. He does have a business and he does do this. And he seems to be very, very knowledgeable. Now, remember, everything I talked about here is only relevant for a natal chart reading. And really, for this particular video, only about your guardian spirit sector. No place else. The other aspects of your natal chart are read slightly differently, basically just with a different focus. And the forecasting or divination charts, which are basically the same thing, they're read very, very differently. So don't try to apply any of this to a forecast reading. So that's basically it. I'd like to thank you for watching. Please feel free to contact me here if you have any questions, or visit my ad-free website. And I will have a bunch more videos on this subject in the months to come. This has taken me quite a while to do. I have to do a lot of reading, make sure I'm getting things right, because it's been a while since I've looked at it. Thank you again for watching.